The project manager's voice was calm at first, then it wasn't. He had been on the phone for 11 minutes with the county zoning office, and by minute 12, he was standing in the parking lot of the Harlan County Planning Department with his jacket off, his tie loosened, and his face the color of a bad sunburn. The words coming back through the phone were simple. You cannot build the access road. Why not? Because you don't own the land it crosses. Who does? A woman named Edna Pruitt. Silence. How much does she want? She hasn't called back. He stood there for a long moment, looking out at the flat Tennessee farmland stretching toward the ridge. Somewhere behind that ridge, 340 acres of Calder Creek Basin sat waiting. Land his company had spent 4 years and $42 million assembling, permitting, and designing into the most ambitious lakefront resort project in the county's history. All of it sitting still. Because of a fence line. A $5,000 fence line. And one 74-year-old woman who had seen all of this coming before the developer ever drew his first blueprint. Her name was Edna Pruitt. And it all started with a map she found in a church basement in the spring of 1998. If you respect the kind of person who sees what nobody else sees and waits longer than anyone else would, subscribe now. This channel is built for you. Edna Pruitt had farmed the same 90 acres in Harlan County, Tennessee for most of her adult life. She and her late husband Roy had raised tobacco, then soybeans, then nothing in particular, just the land itself, maintained and quiet and theirs. Roy passed in 1994. Edna stayed. She was not the kind of woman who drew attention. She drove a 1987 Ford pickup the color of old mustard. She wore the same 3 pairs of boots in rotation. She kept a garden that her neighbor Dorothy called embarrassingly productive. But Edna had one habit nobody fully understood. She read old documents, not newspapers, not novels, county records, deed filings, easement surveys, infrastructure reports from before most people in the county were born. She had started doing it after Roy died, partly to understand what they owned, and partly because it gave her something to do on the long winter evenings when the house felt too quiet. In March of 1998, she was helping sort donated books for the First Baptist Church rummage sale when she found something tucked inside a box of old county commission meeting minutes from the 1960s, a hand-drawn survey map. Dated 1961. It showed Calder Creek Basin, the low flat land east of Route 7, and a proposed resort and recreation corridor that the state had floated during the early Tennessee tourism push. The project had died in 1967 when funding collapsed. But the map showed something that made Edna sit down on a metal folding chair and look very carefully. A designated access corridor, 12 feet wide, running along the northern boundary of the basin, crossing a narrow strip of high ground between 2 wetland parcels, connecting Route 7 to the interior of the basin. The corridor had been surveyed, recorded, and never legally dissolved. It still existed on paper. Edna looked at that corridor for a long time. Then she looked at where it crossed. Her fence line. The old split-rail fence Roy had built in 1973 along the northern edge of their property sat directly across that corridor. The land beneath it, a thin strip barely wide enough to call a parcel, had been recorded separately in the original 1961 survey as a transitional easement buffer. It had its own parcel number. Edna wrote it down on the back of a church bulletin. Then she drove to the county clerk's office the following Monday morning. The clerk's name was Beverly. She had worked the desk for 22 years and knew most of what came through it. She did not know what Edna was asking for at first. "I need the tax record on a parcel," Edna said. She slid the number across the counter. Beverly typed it in, looked at the screen, typed it again. "It's showing as unclaimed," Beverly said. "Been on the books since 1961. Nobody's ever paid tax on it. Can I claim it? Beverly looked at her over the top of her glasses. You'd need to file a quiet title action. Prove no one else has a valid claim. How long does that take? Beverly shrugged. 6 months. Maybe 8. Edna nodded once. Thank you, Beverly. She hired a property attorney named Carl Hutchins out of Cookville. He was 58, methodical, and not easily surprised. But when Edna laid the 1961 survey map and the parcel record on his desk, he looked at them for a long time without speaking. Mrs. Pruitt, he finally said, do you understand what this is? A fence line, Edna said. Carl looked at her. It's the only practical access point into the entire Calder Creek Basin. Edna folded her hands in her lap. I know. If anyone ever tries to develop that basin, I know, she said again. Carl filed the quiet title action in September of 1998. 6 months later, in March of 1999, Edna Ruth Pruitt became the legal owner of a strip of land 12 feet wide and a quarter-mile long. She paid $5,000 in legal fees and filing costs. She paid $38 in property taxes every year after that. And she told nobody. For the first several years, nothing happened. Edna mowed the strip the way she mowed everything, twice a year, clean and even. She kept the fence post straight. She paid her $38 every April without fail. Dorothy asked her once why she bothered keeping that scrubby little strip so tidy. Edna said, Roy always said a fence worth building is worth keeping. Dorothy nodded and didn't ask again. Then, in 2011, Edna noticed something. Survey flags, orange ones, appearing along the eastern ridge above Calder Creek. Then a crew. 2 trucks, 1 drone, 3 men in vests she didn't recognize. She watched from her porch with a cup of coffee and said nothing. Over the next 2 years, parcels in the basin began changing hands quietly. An LLC registered in Atlanta acquired 40 acres, then 60 more. A different LLC, same registered agent, picked up another 80. By 2014, Edna had tracked 7 separate transactions in her notebook, all pointing to the same address. Caldwell Venture Group, Atlanta, Georgia. She looked them up at the library. Resort developers. 3 lakefront properties in Georgia, 1 in Alabama, 1 under construction in western North Carolina. Edna went home, opened her notebook, and wrote 1 line. They're coming. Then she put the kettle on. The first knock came in 2015. A young man in a company truck. Friendly, professional. He introduced himself as a land acquisition associate for Caldwell Venture Group and said his company was interested in purchasing some parcels in the area. He had a number ready. $60,000. For the fence line strip. Edna looked at him for a moment. She said, I'm not interested. He said the number could go higher. She said, I expect it can. Then she closed the door. She opened her notebook and wrote down the date, his name, and the offer. In 2017, a different man came, senior this time. Real estate attorney, leather portfolio, firm handshake. $180,000. Edna poured him coffee, listened to everything he said, and told him no. He said, Mrs. Pruitt, with respect, that strip of land has no practical use to you. Edna set down her cup. It has exactly the use I intended for it, she said. He left without the portfolio being opened. In 2019, Caldwell sent their vice president of acquisitions. He drove a black SUV and wore a watch Edna estimated cost more than her truck. He offered $400,000. Edna thanked him for the drive and told him the road back to the highway was well marked. She wrote it all down. Every offer, every name, every date. Then she went back to her garden. Think about that for a moment. $400,000 in cash. Most people would never see that kind of money in a lifetime. Edna said no without losing a night of sleep. If you've ever believed in something long enough to let the world laugh at you for it, you already understand her. Subscribe now so you never miss a story like this one. In the spring of 2023, Caldwell Venture Group filed for final development approval. The Calder Creek Resort, 340 acres, lakefront hotel, 200 luxury cabins, a marina, 2 restaurants, a spa. Projected construction cost, $42 million. Projected completion, spring 2026. It was the biggest private development project in Harlan County history. The county planning board approved it in August. Caldwell's project manager flew in from Atlanta. His name was Marcus Webb, 41 years old. He had managed 7 resort builds across 4 states. He was not the kind of man who expected problems at this stage. He found one on his 3rd day. The access road shown on the approved site plan, the only practical route connecting Route 7 to the resort's main entrance, crossed a parcel not owned by Caldwell Venture Group. Parcel 1961 NC7, 12 feet wide, a quarter-mile long, owned by one Edna Pruitt of Harlan County, Tennessee. Webb called his legal team. His legal team called the county. The county confirmed what the record showed. Then Webb's attorney said something that made the room go very quiet. She's held that parcel for 24 years, paid taxes every single year. There is no adverse claim, no lapse, no dispute. The parcel is clean. Webb stood up. So we reroute the access road. His attorney opened a site map on the laptop. The southern boundary is wetlands, federally protected. The western approach crosses 3 private parcels, none of whom have agreed to sell. The northern route adds 2.3 miles and requires a bridge over Calder Creek that isn't permitted. Webb looked at the map for a long time. There's no other way in? His attorney looked at him. There is one way in, she said, through Mrs. Pruitt's fence line. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. Edna was in the garden pulling late tomatoes when her daughter-in-law called from inside. There's a man on the phone. Says it's urgent. Edna came inside, washed her hands, and picked up the phone. Mrs. Pruitt, my name is Daniel Reeves. I represent Caldwell Venture Group. I'd like to discuss your parcel on the northern basin boundary. Edna said nothing. We're prepared to offer $750,000. Cash. Closing within 21 days. Edna looked out the kitchen window at the fence line Roy had built 50 years ago. She said, I appreciate the call. Reeves sounded relieved. So you'll consider it? I said I appreciate the call, Edna said. Then she hung up. She called her son Thomas that evening. Thomas was 49, a property attorney in Nashville, quiet and precise the way she had raised him to be. Dad, she said, they offered $750,000. Thomas was quiet a moment. What did you say? I hung up. Another pause. Mom, what do you want? Edna looked across the darkening field. I don't want to sell it. I want what it's worth to them. Thomas took a slow breath. Then I need to make some calls. Thomas Pruitt had practiced property law for 21 years. He called Daniel Reeves the next morning. I represent Edna Pruitt regarding her parcel on the northern basin boundary. My client will not sell. Reeves said, everyone has a number. Thomas said, open your site plan. Page 14. Your access road crosses my mother's land. She is the only legal path into your project. She will not sell at any price. Then what does she want? A permanent easement, $6,000 a month. Adjusted annually for inflation. Transferable to her heirs in perpetuity. Silence. Caldwell disappeared for 17 days. Then they came back with $3,500 a month, 15-year term. Thomas called Edna. She listened, then said 4 words. Tell them no. $6,000. Caldwell filed a legal challenge 2 weeks later. They argued the parcel had been improperly claimed, that the 1961 corridor had been effectively abandoned when the state tourism project collapsed. Thomas spread Edna's records across the conference table. 38 years of uninterrupted tax payments, the original 1961 survey filing, the 1999 quiet title judgment, a continuous chain of documented ownership with 0 gaps. He looked at Caldwell's attorney. You cannot abandon a parcel the county has taxed for 63 years and a court has already adjudicated. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. The judge reviewed the records, then looked at Caldwell's counsel. Does your client dispute these tax assessments? No, Your Honor. Does your client dispute the 1999 quiet title ruling? No, Your Honor. Then the parcel is valid and the claim is denied. Caldwell called Thomas that afternoon. Daniel Reeves sounded like a different man. Quieter. More careful. Our client will accept Mrs. Pruitt's terms. Thomas kept his voice even. $6,000 a month. Permanent easement. Inflation adjusted annually. Transferable to her heirs. Yes, Reeves said. We agree. Thomas called his mother. They accepted. Every term. Edna was quiet for a moment. Every term? Every single one. She set the phone down on the kitchen table, walked to the window, looked at the fence line in the late afternoon light. Roy had built that fence with wooden posts and field wire in the summer of 1973. She had kept it standing for 50 years, $38 a year in taxes, $5,000 in legal fees, and now $72,000 every year for the rest of her life, and her children's lives after that. 3 weeks later, Edna filed the easement agreement herself at the county clerk's office. Beverly was still behind the desk. She looked at the document, then at Edna. Is this the same parcel from 1999? It is, Edna said. Beverly looked at the monthly figure. She didn't say anything for a moment. Roy would have liked this, Edna said. Beverly stamped the document. I expect he would have, she said. Marcus Webb flew back to Atlanta the following week. The Calder Creek Resort broke ground in the spring of 2024, right on schedule. Every truck that enters the site crosses Edna Pruitt's land. Every month, without fail, the check arrives. Edna cashes it at the same bank branch she has used for 40 years. She does not mention where it comes from. She does not need to. She still drives the mustard-colored Ford. Still tends the garden Dorothy calls embarrassingly productive. Still mows the fence line strip twice a year. Clean and even, the way Roy taught her. Some people said she should have taken the $750,000 and been done with it. Edna never once considered it. Because Roy had taught her something in 50 years of farming that no developer in a black SUV ever learned behind a desk. The land does not pay you when you sell it. The land pays you when you hold it. If you believe in the kind of patience that takes decades to ripen, subscribe now and tell me in the comments, would you have taken the $750,000? Or would you have held on like Edna did? I'll see you next story.